What's up, Footer Nation? Gary Hootenholla here, and welcome to another episode of the NYBS radio show right here from the great state of New York. I am super stoked for tonight's show because we got Kenny back. Well, I haven't seen Kenny in a hot second, so we're going to catch up with him in a couple minutes. And then we have my boy, Dark Hour Paranormal, Quincy, Michael, whatever he wants to be called. Tonight is his night, all right? His thought process to the Bigfoot phenomena is amazing to me. He's mind-blowing. It's simple, and we have some really deep conversation going to be coming your way, especially when we're now involved in Paranormal, or I keep saying Paranormal X, Project X, NYBS project, looking into the supernatural, the paranormal, extraterrestrial possibilities of a Bigfoot type creature. As you know, I'm a flesh and blood guy. I stay on that side, but I'm not going to lie. Recently, I've been kind of opening my eyes in some different theories that I'm actually kind of getting a little bit of backlash from, but whatever. And but looking at things a little bit differently because we may not be doing anything right in some ways. Once again, the things that we do in the Bigfoot phenomena is from the Bigfoot community. What we learn in the Bigfoot community all these years, that is part of the problem. That we're not now, we have to take a little bit of a step back, a step outside of the Bigfoot community, and think like a skeptic. Think like another, what other people may look for that maybe we don't look for because we're kind of tainted in our thought process. And I'm super guilty of that. You know what I mean? So this project, these type of things is now what we're doing. So I'm super stoked about that. And Kenny's still busy. So Quincy, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on, guys? Happy to be here. Thank you for having me on. It's been too much time that has passed between us since our last conversation on Dark Hour Paranormal, which I will tell people who are listening out there, not to plug the show or anything, but it was absolutely fantastic, thought-provoking, and inspiring. Gary is one hell of a mind himself, and his interpretation of Bigfoot is incredibly curious, and it gives you so much edge and peripheral to whatever you believe. So definitely check it out. It was awesome. And I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
No, thanks for the kind words. So Kenny's still getting situated. So tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, what you're interested in.
So I'm definitely a jack of all trades when it comes to the paranormal and ufology and all these fields of esotericism. I started when I was very young, around 12 years old. I started to what we might call have an awakening. And I believe that's something that everybody goes through at that age. It's just a matter of, through their particular lens, how they're going to interpret it. A lot of people talk about, coming into adulthood and having, heavy suicidal thoughts or depression and stuff like this. And, people call it teenage angst. So at that point, I started taking it a different direction rather than, being negative, which I initially was. But this path of whatever you want to call it, spirituality or inquiry into the unknown, has been a very steady and stable platform for me throughout the remainder of my life up to this point. So yeah, I started doing radio back in 2004. That opened up many different avenues for me, and I decided to become very serious about this topic in respect to presentation about a year ago when I started the Dark Hour Paranormal YouTube channel. And here we are today, about a year later, a little bit more refined and still as inquisitive with a lot more questions that I think that I started with.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I always say. Like, we answer a question with another question. It's like, it's like right when you think you're one step further and closer, you're like 5 steps backwards because you're starting right back from where you just started. So it's like, it's just that revolving door.
Well, isn't it funny that sort of mirrors what we find in the scientific community or archaeology or geology? It doesn't matter. You pick one of those fields of discovery and research, and what we do fits right alongside them. And yet we're, exploring topics that are not so tangible in, again, comparison to those other fields, but we're doing the same sort of approach.
Yeah, no, 100%. And the cryptopunkologist, Kenny, KW Irish, is back in town. What's up, Kenny?
Hey, I'm just living the dream. Happy to be back on the show with you because again, yeah, like you'd mentioned earlier, man, it's been a while. So in the last show that we were doing, I had to buzz out, right at the beginning of it. So it's good to be here and hanging with you and our friend over here. So it's the first time I've met him. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what he has to say. So plus he looks intelligent, which is great. You know,
I don't even have my glasses on, but thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, no, his brain is amazing. So, Kenny, so do you want to talk about anything that you've been up to since, you know, our fan base, you know, they know who you are. So is there anything new, or are you still hiding out in your little lair?
I've been doing a little bit of hiding. You know, obviously, you know, with COVID, you know, a lot of the events, you know, are still kind of up in the air. So as of right now, there's only 2 that I'm planning on being at this year, that are confirmed. The company Corridor 13 has been reaching out to other locations in representation of me, and then I don't know if this came up the last time, but for anybody who's been trying to buy Folklore Frankensteins, it's actually been pulled from the shelves. It's no longer available. It's actually it's with a different publisher now. They've gone through. We made some changes. There's a lot more monster in it. There's a lot more you know, creature lore. So we're working on that, and then we're going to be re-releasing it. It's got a new title, and it's just going to be fantastic. And then once that rolls out, you're going to see me on a lot more radio shows in a lot of different areas. So so that's kind of what I've been doing, what I've been up to. You know, my day job, you know, working my butt off, and then you know, the rest of the time just staying sane, and you know, just you know, just enjoying life, and you know, this passion.
Yeah. No, I mean, you say, and all these books, and man, do you have an event like that's coming up that, you know, like one of the first ones, you know, you're going to be a part of?
The first one that I know I'm going to be a part of is in October.
Okay.
So I've had a few different locations reach out to me, and I had Corridor reach out to them with the information and everything. So they're just negotiating that and working that out, and you know, we're gonna go from there. But again, it's, you know, it's 2020. You know, it was a lot of people. A lot of these events lost deposits on hotels where they were going to hold the events. A lot of different things like that. So you know, a lot of these organizers are starting out in the red right now, so yeah. They're really concerned about, you know, turnout, you know, folks buying tickets. So so October is Fort Wayne, Indiana, for DeadCon. That one right now is still in play, which is awesome. They've been adding all kinds of awesome guests for it. I mean, just the creator of The Crow, one of the actors from The Crow, again, Kane Hodder's going to be there. There's a bunch of other guys that played Jason from Friday the 13th is going to be there. So it's just going to be an awesome event. One of the guitar players from Megadeth is going to be there, you know, signing autographs. Nice. So yeah. So it's going to be great, you know, hanging out with everybody. And but as of right now, that's the only thing that's set in stone. But you know, who knows what'll happen. Other than that, you know, again, I'll be, you know, doing different radio shows, and you know, again, just having fun with the passion and getting to know you know, a lot of great people like our friend Mike here. It's Mike, right? No.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
Awesome. No, you know, anything to say. Go ahead, man.
I was just gonna say, I've been sitting here listening to you talk and looking at it, and I couldn't put my finger on who you reminded me of. You guys can hear me? Oh, we're back.
Yeah, we got you back.
No, yes.
Is that my internet?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right.
Yeah.
I was saying, I've been sitting here listening to you and looking at you, and I couldn't put my finger on who you reminded me of, but it just came to me. I don't know if you're familiar with the band Sabaton, but you look like the lead singer, Joachim Broden, I think is his name. It's a Swedish band, but yeah. That's all.
Yeah, I've heard of the band. I don't know what the guy looks like. Usually people like, you know, say, "Oh, I know who you look like. You look like Pee Wee Herman or Alfalfa." So I appreciate the I'm going to take yours as a compliment.
Yeah. Well, for whatever it's worth, I think he's a good-looking guy. I mean, as far as I can tell, being a straight man looking at another straight man. But right. Yeah, take it as a compliment, brother.
Awesome.
Well, I mean, Kenny was in bands forever. I mean, Kenny was he's from that culture, so. It's awesome. So, all right, let's get right into this. All right, Federal Nation Show, here you go. You got all of us here, and it's been a hot second, so we're gonna dive right into the subject of Bigfoot. So, Mike, Dark Hour, Quincy, let's get right into it. So what do you think a Bigfoot possibly is?
Okay. Was that question for me? Because you kind of broke up at the beginning, but I think I got the
Yeah.
gist of it.
Yeah.
If that was for me. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. So what do you think
all right. So
is?
Bigfoot, you know what? That's a really big question there. So, I mean, there are many different theories when it comes to Bigfoot and how and why he might exist. I think that, this sort of spider webs from one central idea, and that is that we've witnessed this creature and it's been seen for many years. From that one central core experience, we get all of these, again, spider webs of theories. Personally, I think that, well, the more that I go forward and talk to people and research this myself, I think that Bigfoot might actually encapsulate both the physical and the non-physical in certain ways. Now, how they might engage that mechanism of switching over or what have you, the only thing I can think of, and I'm sure it's probably a short shot, so to say, is, with the way that Tibetan monks and some different disciplines like that are able to basically, and if not influence their environment, they're able to influence their body enough that the environment around them is manipulated by that energy. You can go into many different examples of how that happens, the mind over matter sort of thing. So maybe if there is an interdimensional aspect to Bigfoot, like we like to talk about, or at least propose, it would be, in my opinion, something ancient, something that is innate and has been there intrinsically for many years, the same way that it's natural for us to walk and talk and communicate with each other. I think this would be a facet that Bigfoot held that, again, was very intrinsic. So I do believe, to make a long story short here, that Bigfoot has a physical element and counterpart to him, but I think that there's something else there that we're just not seeing. And I have a feeling that it's a learned behavior or an evolutionary behavior that they've had for longer than perhaps we have been tracking them and been savvy to their existence.
No, and that's great. And one thing I've been, toying with a little bit, and I just got was on a show last week and talking about this is, I say that we have 6 senses, right? I think Bigfoot has 8, 9, 10 senses. I think throughout evolution, throughout time, we're no longer in the woods. We're no longer, farming and doing those things just to survive. So I feel like a lot of these senses that we've just naturally have lost, from anything from, we talk about infrasound and we talk about all these different things, but seeing Bigfoots, in the woods and things like that, I'm starting to think more that, it's not so much that maybe the paranormal aspect of it is like, people, they're disappearing. Like we talk frequency, we talk those kind of things. Maybe for, like you say, from ancient times, for things like that. Maybe there was one point in time that, our ancestors could do something very similar. That, it's just they're able to, do whatever they need to do to kind of vanish and disappear. So you bring up all these, things that, it's like, did we lose a lot of these senses? Is it a possible extraterrestrial type deal thing? That it's like, it does have some kind of, interdimensional power or whatever like that. So, I mean, we bring up a lot of different things, how they disappear.
Well, if it is an if it is an extraterrestrial, has an extraterrestrial affiliation of sort, that'd be mind blowing in itself. But then the next question would be, where in their evolution did they acquire that connection? Was it something that happened early on? Were they, in their point of origin, part of the extraterrestrial culture that they have connection with, or were they approached as people assume, cavemen learned certain things from higher intelligences and other cultures the same way. Where did they get the connection? It's a very curious thing. And if you're not careful, you can pretty much create an entire world the way that Anne Rice has with her Vampire Chronicles. Okay. Everything fits in logically and within reason, but it's a false world, so you have to be careful.
Yeah. And I mean, and once again, Bigfoot in general is like a false world in a lot of ways. And like you say, like all these stories keep popping up over and over. People, either faking stuff, hoaxing stuff, things like that. It depends on who you talk to, depends on what YouTube video you're watching. So it's like it's already been cut almost like a Vampire Diaries type situation, where it's especially with so many people coming into the field, which is great. I mean, it's absolutely awesome to have so many people interested in a creature like this. But also, like you say, on the backside, and then, we have to dissect what is real, what is not. what is a hoax, what is not, and then that's where everything gets very dicey in the whole situation.
That's our fault, by the way. That has nothing to do with Bigfoot. That's our fault to put these falsities out there and manipulate certain people's perceptions. I mean, we do it in other ways and throughout humanity. So it makes sense and stands to reason that it would be present in this field as well. But it's our fault for muddling this up. You know what? If it wasn't for that imperfection, let's say, we might actually have one living next door, shaking hands with us, so to speak. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's the thing. When we talk about losing senses and in different aspects in that way. Because if you think about it, how distracted nowadays are we with everything? If you go back, like, I mean, just I can think back to like 15 years ago before I had a cell phone, and how much simpler life was then. God, remember how simple life was before Facebook, when everybody loved everybody?
Yeah.
Seriously.
If somebody offended somebody, it was to your face. I mean, we're so distracted now with electronics and as things go. And, when you talk about senses, we always talk about, the Native Americans, how they always talked about, Sasquatch as flesh and blood. And I think almost every single tribe also talked about them being a spirit. And it's just like, when, you think about the Native Americans, it's like they were so non-distracted and more focused on their surroundings and what was going on in their area, where I know nowadays it's just like, for me, it's like I can barely sit in one spot for 3 seconds without getting a notification on my phone or something going on. So, as far as losing senses is, I 100% agree with that. And I think, one of the things that, I always tell people, and I've said this to Gary, like when I go out in the woods, I kind of like to just kind of maybe just sit there and just listen and not necessarily even try to do anything. Because, there's so much that you see now in Hollywood that you go out in the woods and you start doing all this Hollywood stuff that everybody's doing. But nobody's, really listening anymore, and then you're getting the people that are getting interested in the subject that are going out there based off of, something that they've seen on TV or in a movie. And then they're going out there, they're doing that. And again, it's just, there's no listening. There's nothing there. It's just straightforward, going out, knocking on trees, this and that, which I'm not saying that that's not important, but what I'm saying is, like, we go out and I don't think we listen as much, and I don't think we get, we become kind of one with our surroundings in the woods. And I think we're doing so much that, I think there's times where, a Sasquatch could probably walk right behind me and I wouldn't even know it because I'm so distracted with everything else. So I just wanted to comment on that because, the way that you guys just put it, I've thought of it that way, but not in the sense that you put it in there as in, becoming kind of, I guess, senseless in a way, if that makes sense.
Well, keep this in mind, too, going along those same lines, because I think that this is a very valid thing to look at and even dig deeper than we may be able to go into tonight. So I don't think there's any doubt, all right, at least within America, we'll say that these Native Americans and these cultures had more of a connection with the earth or some nature energy, if you want to leave it at that. That being said, there were many of them who understood natural magic, the good and the bad, if you will, and were able to use this properly. I think Gary and I may have spoken about this at one point to some capacity, but to elaborate a little bit on that, these people were every single day, if you will, working with energies that had the ability to manifest physically and to dissolve back into the ethereal. And they were able to communicate with them on both of those levels, again, to make this simple. That being said, if they come into contact with something like a Bigfoot, okay, and they recognize it from its origin, and they would know maybe, and yet there's this physical counterpart and this thing dissolves and it's switching in and out of dimensions as at will. It would be a very natural course for these people to see this because they're experiencing it in their everyday life. Whereas today, like Kenny's saying, we're very distracted, and that's on purpose too, in a lot of ways. That's by design is what I mean to say. And, we're just starting to realize that now, and sort of, this is the intellectual rebellion. I think that we're kind of spearheading here within the last 30, 40 years concerning this sort of design. But yeah, going back to the Native Americans, they were very connected. So they're able to, even today, these stories that have been passed down through generations and generations, some of them not adulterated by much, okay, in the way of that telephone communication, right? And these people will tell you the stories of when we used to live in harmony with certain creatures, or why a relationship soured with the Pukwudgies and so forth. So there's history there, albeit maybe not very much, only a few strands, but those few strands might be very strong.
No, and that's perfectly said. And I think there's a terminology for it. It's called like forest bathing or forest basking, where people go out into the woods. Yeah, I mean, it's something along those lines. Where people go out, where people actually go out into the woods. It's a lot of spiritual things. Once again, people go out into the woods, sit in their natural environments, and just bask in and take in all the quiet, but all the energy that the woods has to offer. I mean, I can tell you for myself personally, if I'm having a really bad week and things aren't going my way for whatever reason, if I go back into the woods, I can tell you I come back in a whole different mindset, in a positive mindset. So it would make sense that, if you kind of just go out, sit into these areas, take in all these natural energies. Now, you brought up Pukwudgies and things like that. Let's take this to the next level. Now, Pukwudgie, I love it. Pukwudgies, once again, would be a supernatural creature in some way, because they're there, then they're gone. We're talking about little people. And if you don't know what a Pukwudgie is, it's basically a little person. It's a little person that's in the woods. We hear about it all the time. Actually, I just started the New York Pukwudgie Society to go look into this phenomenon of Pukwudgies and these little people that people actually see in the woods. There's many stories, but then, not to get off the subject, if we look at that as a supernatural thing where people actually see it and then it dissolves and goes back into the environment, is it possible that Bigfoot would be able to kind of do the same thing? Yeah, it leaves, footprints. It leaves these kind of things. If we look at the ghost phenomena itself, and once again, Kenny and I are flesh and blood guys, so I can't say this enough, right? This is all theory. But if we look at the ghost phenomena, why is it that certain people see a ghost, and you could be standing next to each other? One person will see the ghost clear as day, like it's a person standing there. The next person doesn't even know what you're talking about and thinks you're batshit crazy. And they're like, well, there's nothing there, blah, blah, blah. Now, what if a Bigfoot is kind of the same? Because if we actually stop and think about this, what's one of the things that we all say as Bigfooters? Well, the Bigfoot's going to choose if it shows itself or not. All right. And then my rebuttal to that has always been, well, they make mistakes. Everything makes mistakes. Crossing roads, do those kind of things. It's been seen. But now if we back up a little bit to what I just said before, maybe that person is supposed to see that Bigfoot at that exact time. Because if we're using that theory that the Bigfoot shows itself to us, then that actually still fits in that theory. Because even though it's crossing the road and the person's observing that, there may be someone in that car that doesn't even see it, but the other person did. So if we're using the paranormal ghost phenomena theory, where one person can see things and one person can't, or is it when groups of people see these things, are they a collective mind? Once again, because we know about the conscious and the unconscious, and we call it the collective mind, where a group of people, even though they come from different backgrounds, can actually visualize things and see things, or vice versa. It kind of still fits into that weird category of the weirdness, that's just another theory to think about.
Yes, absolutely. You know what? One of the questions I've always had, because again, we're exploring these different webs, is the level of sentience that possibly Bigfoot has. Is it at a point where it can manipulate our energy and frequency, or perhaps be aware of our own spirituality or path? Is there any mirror there? So when they cross the path, they know it may have an impact, and how it may impact somebody and other people in that person's life. It's a question of the level of awareness that this creature has. And because of its ambiguity and because of the fact that it's very difficult to find it, it's just a question that we're still left pondering. Now, when you're talking about, two people standing, seeing the same event and seeing two different things. We also find this with UFOs as well. So is there some sort of, again, a mechanism that's being employed, by these entities, or, whether it's the vehicle, there must be somebody in the vehicle, I'm assuming. Okay. If not, well, we'll go down that road.
Yeah.
But could they be using a similar effect on people at large, almost in cahoots, knowing or sitting on that certain level of awareness that we perhaps just haven't reached yet, and they're kind of waiting for us to get up there, although we look at them and think of them as something so different and outside of ourselves?
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to throw this out there. So it's kind of like a question, because I've heard many people say that if you have a certain spirit about you or way about you, you have a certain energy.
Yeah.
Where they're going to be more attracted and maybe show themselves, like they can sense your energy, and you're able to see them because of that. Because if you've got two people, looking in the same direction, say just going down the road, and then you get only one person sees them, is that by design? Is that, I only want this person to, again, it's one of those questions where you're going to get another question with it. It's just, it's like I take my glasses off and I do the I got them by my, so it's funny because that's the thing. You look back to where, where people talked about like energy and being one with the earth, and it's like, does that all intermingle? Does that all have something to do with sightings and who sees what and when they see what?
Well, let's even go one step further. Let's keep exploring this side of the
way.
Steps
further.
Nah, screw it. Go 3. Come on, guys.
So 6. This is the NYBS. This is how we do this. So at the end of the day, let's think about it. Now, maybe what you just said, and we agree that, we give off energy and certain things are attracted to certain people. Let's take that a step further. Is that why now we hear when we talk about Bigfoot, is that why more women see Bigfoot and have those experiences? And Bigfoot seem to be more interested in women than men itself. Now, we always go on our side as a flesh and blood guy, which would make logical sense. You're talking about territorial issues. Once again, a man coming in, a Bigfoot would know that we're a man. Regardless, he would know, or she would know, that we're alpha because we're in the woods and by ourselves. Animals that see another animal by itself and a male would automatically think that's an alpha predator, alpha male, because you're by yourself. You're doing your thing. You know what I mean? You're just kind of out there. But then we hear the stories where children and women, Bigfoots are very attracted to them. That's actually one reason I don't bring my daughter in the woods. But she asked me to go out in the woods all the time, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to be responsible for that. Like, if God forbid, if something happens, regardless of what anybody believes. Now, she's a hiker like me. She's starting to get into the mountaineering stuff. She does all that stuff. But I just don't trust it enough because, God forbid, something happens to your child. So, but now we're going back to what Kenny said. It's talking about energy. It's talking about those things. We already know women are more empathic than men. We already know that women feel a lot more than men. So could this be the reason why Bigfoots possibly show themselves to women and children more, and not really the reason that we're saying is, listen, it's an alpha predator in the woods. They're interested in women because in Native American stories that we heard, they would offer up a woman to a Bigfoot, and the Bigfoot would carry her off into the woods and who knows what. But that's the kind of the way we've been thinking. But maybe we're talking about this energy. We're talking about this kind of stuff. That would almost make sense why a Bigfoot would offer itself up to a woman or a child a lot more than a male.
There's still a congruity here, between the two theories. And, again, you bring up the physical element of territorial stakes and so forth. But there are let me put it this way. A lot of people claim that they can see energy. All right. Whether that's just, the auric field or the actual geometry within that auric field or the many layers within our auric field. Some people claim that they can see this energy and then actually derive something out of it, whether it's, I think it's more of a feeling based emotional thing rather than intellectual. But of course it goes through that intellectual lens as well. So is it possible that Bigfoot has some sort of ability in the same way where it's something that's been cultured, and the way that perhaps night vision came into evolution for some animals, Bigfoot is able to see the sacred geometry or to feel some of that energy. Now, why maybe they're interested in children and women? Well, children have very soft energy, the majority of them will say, and they are closer to the source or wherever the hell we came from than you and I are, because we've been anchored in here. We've gotten our perception of the world. We're very anchored into this reality at this age. Now, my kids, they're going to tell me fantastic ideas. They all have great imaginations, but to them, it can be very real. And that's, again, because they just literally entered into this body not too long ago. So they're still getting their time to kind of fully integrate within the human body. And that takes some time, believe it or not. So that might be a reason that they're attracted to children. Now, for women, it's a feminine energy. It's not aggressive. It's not threatening. It's the exact opposite of that. It is emotional. It's intuitive. And if there is this really deep aspect of that within Bigfoot, and that it's cultured and evolved that way, well, that would make sense that they're interested in the same sort of energies.
Yeah, and then even thinking about it, like I'm kind of going through my head about like encounter stories, and kind of jump in here because this is your wheelhouse too. A lot of the encounter stories where we hear about Bigfoots crossing roads and people seeing them, a lot of times, I mean, I can right off the bat think about 7 or 8 women that are the ones that saw one crossing the road right off the bat. Yes, we do hear men. But the first thing that started popping into my head was, I can already start telling you, like, this woman saw one. If you watch Finding Bigfoot, it seems like that's what it is. You know what I mean? Like, women seeing Bigfoots cross the road. And now if we kind of take this to the 7th level now, that maybe, just maybe, that energy that person's giving off, and if we do say Bigfoot allows us to see it. I've always had a problem with road crossings. Why is that? It's simple. We say Bigfoot's like super intelligent, right? We say Bigfoot is because we can't find one. We can't see it. It's there, but we can't see it. If Bigfoot, though, was super intelligent, why would it risk itself in front of a moving car at 65 miles an hour on a highway at nighttime and go out in front of somebody knowing 100% it's going to beat that car no matter what? I mean, let's think about that. It doesn't, once again, if we think of it logically, that makes 0 sense. Now, deer and other kind of animals, we already know that they don't have that thought process. And deer, once again, once they're pinpointed to go, they go. All right. So if we're saying, though, that Bigfoot's this big, bad, intelligent, when I say bad, not like negative, but big, bad, alpha, intelligent creature, then why would it risk itself like that in front of a moving vehicle? And why would only certain people see it and not others? So these are things that, once again, it's like it's that circle. It keeps coming to that circle, but it's looking outside the box, and that's what Project X does. Is I would have never talked about any of this before, but now it's like thinking about these things in a different way. What do you guys think about that?
I got to say, and when you first presented Project X, I was thrilled about it, because I think any serious researcher in any field actually, doesn't 100% sit in one chair, especially in a subject like this. Again, like I always say, that doesn't have any accountability. To look at everything from all angles, not necessarily saying that every angle is actually correct or true, but at least taking that time to go in and actually look into it and get some data, get some understanding of, what somebody else's theory is. It doesn't mean that you're jumping on that bandwagon saying, yes, this is this. Like what, you keep saying, that we're flesh and blood, and I'm definitely flesh and blood. And I always tell people I'm 95% flesh and blood, because I need 5% to continue researching and looking at other options and other ideas. Also, that way I don't become this closed-minded lunatic, going on Facebook arguing with people about what is right and what isn't right. I can go on there and I can talk with people and look at different theories and again, and enjoy the subject and the direction of the legend and the lore that goes with it. So it's just, again, I think, somebody who's a true researcher We'll look at different angles. Again, not jump on a bandwagon and this week I'm over here, this week I'm over here. No, I'm right here, but I'm checking this out over here. I'm reading on this over here. I'm just looking into these different aspects, because there's a very good chance that every theory out there that I know of, that I've heard of, every single one of them's wrong, and we just haven't come across the right one. Yeah. So I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna fall in love and marry one certain theory. I'm gonna leave enough area open where I can continue to research, look, and understand. Because again, like I said before, my research in history, originated and comes from like the Native Americans. So I can't be 100% flesh and blood, because the people that I look to for some of these answers to kind of guide me in the direction to get the best research and go as far back as I possibly can, didn't just think all flesh and blood. So, so I've got to leave that area open enough to be able to, again, just to be able to go in and also be able to have conversations with everybody, no matter what side of the aisle that they're on, which I think is the most important aspect in when it comes to communicating with, individuals and research.
Oh, 100%. Quincy. So let's get right back into all the paranormal weirdness. So we always hear about Bigfoot, and I've already seen it in a couple of times in the chat. Bigfoot and extraterrestrials, and once again, Bigfoot's in UFOs, and there's a link to them somehow, is what a lot of people say. There was that story, I think Stan Gordon actually investigated, where a woman had a Bigfoot right outside her house. She ends up pulling out a shotgun and goes to shoot the Bigfoot, and it vanishes and it just disappeared. It was no longer there. We can't once again say if these stories are false and these stories aren't true, because it doesn't fit our narrative, kind of what Kenny was saying. At the end of the day, we always have to look into this. So what do you think, if you think, is there a connection to these areas where Bigfoot and UFOs are found? And to piggyback off, why do you think that there's a connection?
It does seem to be that there is a connection between at least the UFO sites and the sightings and Bigfoot sightings, which is just another interesting congruity that we can't really explain. It's possible that all these things are connected. And I think it was John Keel who believed that they were all connected and yet still had their own individual identities in one way, shape, or form, or that they came from the same dimension, perhaps just beyond ours. But, I do believe that all of this is connected in one way, shape, or form, if not by the characteristics of the experiences, certainly by the way that these experiences are dictated from the other side. I think they're, again, using the same, I hate using this word again, but mechanisms to do these things. Because if everything is frequency and everything is vibration, and you understand the core functionality of that, and then again, the things that branch out of that, you're able to manipulate the very reality that we live in. And I believe that there are a lot of people who've already done that in certain organizational bodies, will say. And, we're just starting to see some of this technology that's beyond our wildest dreams come out now. Things that we may not have believed that we'd see as a possibility for a couple hundred years, maybe. So, there is definitely a possibility of Bigfoot being connected to the extraterrestrials. Now, how that might have come to be, I have to go and refer back to what I mentioned earlier, wherein, we have to kind of see where in the evolution that came from. Personally, if I was to give you my just honest, straight opinion, I think that there is some element where they work together. And I believe that Bigfoot at least began as an extraterrestrial species or an interdimensional species, if there is a separation between the two, and has its own existence and what you might call purpose here in the physical on this planet. And its interaction is meaningful for us. And I think it's also part of the growing consciousness of the collective, wherein we see a Bigfoot. Okay, so this person has this experience and now they're starting to question everything. This guy sees a ghost, he's questioning everything. This guy sees XYZ or UFO, whatever it is. All of these events that we cannot readily explain, I mean, to the nth degree, not just, a few variables here, pushes people into a new realm of perception, of a new realm of questioning, and the thirst to find out more and to really get down to the core of truth, because when they're doing this and this world is becoming what it is for them, the world they knew before is crumbling around them. So they may accept this new perception that they're getting and the way that they're thinking perception wise, but it's breaking down their religion, it's breaking down their political beliefs, their societal beliefs, even, you know, beliefs about family and friend connections. So it's challenging their old paradigm to have something of an experience like this. So just to get back to the extraterrestrial affiliation, if the extraterrestrials have any part in that awakening, as we have been told and has been proposed many times before, maybe Bigfoot is a leg of that.
Yeah, and that would make sense. I mean, in a lot of ways. And then we have to question this: is that, you know, this awakening, and where, you know, we talked about this on your show, how there's a, you know, you feel like, you know, in this time of our lives, a lot of people are now using their brains basically, but using it to the point of where there's a grand awakening where we're feeling, seeing, sensing things and questioning things that we, you know, we would never have questioned, and it's coming into a next form of evolution per se. But then the next question would be is, you know, we hear these stories about Bigfoot, you know what I mean? But I mean, I could tell you, like, I'm a paranormal guy. I've done that. I was a paranormal investigator way before I did Bigfoot. But I've seen ghosts before. I've seen shadow people. I've seen a UFO before. I've seen 2 Bigfoot now. Well, 1.5. So yeah, it's that first story is still, I know what I saw, but I 1.5. So, you know, but anyway, but now what's you know, think about this. Does it take a certain type of person, going back to what Kenny was saying before? We're talking about energy. We're talking about what things are attracted to. But does it take a certain type of person to now see all this stuff? Because now, like you say, if we're using the next evolution of consciousness, do you think that that's what's happening now? Is that now the same type of people are seeing the same type of things? Maybe like a Pudgwookie or a fairy or things like that. Maybe orbs in the forest are fairies for all we know, and we just say they're orbs of the forest. But maybe it is a fairy. But do you think it's a, you know, it's a certain type of person now that's awakened to this stuff that's able to see all of this now?
Well, let's put it this way. There are people who have claimed, again, to be able to see the physical and then be able to see the etheric, possibly at the same time, but still interpret them as 2 different experiences. When somebody looks at another who has this sort of awareness, they might see us as a glowing light. And they might not see the physical body the way that you and I are, you know, trained to do. You know, a lot of this has to do with the brain and the mind and the way that we think and the avenues that thought travels and, you know, the way that we perceive the world. So, you know, going back to where some of these thoughts originated from, we have to keep in mind that at birth, or since birth, I should say, we're given a perception of the world. We're told what the world is rather than, hey, go explore it and come up with your own conclusions. We're told by our parents, we're told by our pastors, we're told by our teachers, you name it. Any authority figure is giving that little bit of a piece of their world to you, and you're then forming a collection of other people's worlds together. And you're walking around saying, I'm confused. Again, this is where the whole adolescence thing comes in, because at that point, the energy starts to fully anchor into the body and you become that full you that you came here to be. It takes that long, again, you know, from birth until about the teenage years to be fully anchored in. And, you know, these questions start to come up, you know, who am I? What does this all mean? What's the meaning of life? So I forgot the original question, but you know what? If you were just to mention the last couple sentences there, I'll probably be able to get back on to where I was going with this.
No, you're fine. Like I say, we're just talking about the collective, how like certain people, because maybe they're more awoken.
Oh, right. Okay.
Here's a question. Actually, this goes along. So Howie Odell asked this question. I'm gonna put it up for all of us, and it kind of goes along with that. It says, you know, it goes, is it that many are awakening, or is it that the veil has become that's this? So, you know, can we now see through that veil that we always talk about, not just on Samhain, that, you know, the veil's the thinnest throughout the year, Halloween for those that didn't know. But do you think that now it's like we're able to see into this new dimension? It would be almost like a dimension, right?
Well, the consciousness awakening and the veil lifting is really sort of a synonymous thing, I think, because one can't really come about without the other. So you know, when you walk into a room, this is an example I like to use a lot, and, you know, you feel somebody in there who's, you know, just really negative or depressed, and you might not necessarily see them first, but you feel them, and you start talking to them. Next thing you know, you feel tired, and you know what, you're at this great party, but you want to go home, but you were ready to go half hour ago. This person pulling energy, and what actually happens, not that this is a conscious thing, is that the energy tries to balance and even itself out. Okay, so when you're looking at this on a bigger scale, talking about the collective, when you have so many people inquiring, the energy, the actual frequency starts to rise. And in that, there become more high frequency knowledge and information that you can, you know, gather only in those particular states, because that's where you are. Just like you and I are experiencing the physical, and there is a core frequency that we all subscribe to in order to exist here. And yet, if you want to go up in a dimension or talk about music and travel that way, that particular realm also has its own set of principles and physics that it lives by. It doesn't necessarily interact with ours the way that we might think it would. So that being said, on a collective scale, if people are really questioning this and their vibration is raising, I think that is helping the veil lift off, but the veil is really just a figurative thing. It's really our collective ignorance and the cap that we put on our memory in terms of cellular memory and spiritual experience for the sake of experiencing that forgetfulness.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't even say it any better. You know what I mean? He said applause. Well said. So, hey.
Thank you, Howie. Thanks for the question, man.
Now, I agree.
I'm glad you answered that.
I told you he's mind melting with these words. But and Patrick Vaughn, you know, he says it perfectly. What I kind of always say. Patrick Vaughn says, "What if we're overthinking?" I mean, one thing. I mean, Kenny, you hear me talk about this all the time. You know, on the backside, is I'm like, a lot of times I think we just overthink all this stuff. I really believe, like, you know, on the show that I was on Super Bowl Sunday. You know, once again, the one guy was like, you know, I think Bigfoot is super intelligent, you know, and I'm like, I don't. I think it's very simple. I think the problem is that once again, it depends on what is super intelligent. I don't think a Bigfoot is intelligent like us. You know, once again, I don't think it could think in those ways, but it's super intelligent by being in its environment, and we don't live in that environment. So earlier, someone talked about camouflage and things like that. A Bigfoot would be able to camouflage itself. A Bigfoot would be able to do, like, disappear magically in the woods, and not because it's magic. It's just that, once again, it's a master of its environment. You know, so it would be able to do those kind of things. So one thing I constantly say is I really believe in the Bigfoot phenomena. We're overthinking a lot of it, when really it's so simple on such a human natural base that. But once again, here's the other question though: is it so simple, but yet we lost that sense throughout time? We lost those senses. The Native Americans, all the tribal people, they have that sense. Did we lose that sense? So now, because we are, you know, more intelligent and can think in a deeper level, did now we lose it all because we're overthinking something that was probably so damn simple?
Well, I think part of it too is, like, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this about myself. I can guarantee you I probably never had it. So for me, it's actually finding it. You know, because, you know, the environment like I grew up in, again, there was always so many distractions, this and that. I don't think I ever personally ever even had that, you know, that I guess if you're saying, like, you know, the simpleness, you know, everything, you know, since I've been born has always just been confusion and chaos. So I don't think I've ever actually even been there. I don't even know what that even is.
And then another thing, well, it's funny that you brought that up, because this goes right into another thing I was thinking. Think about it. Okay, so we look at human nature. A lot of us have ADD, ADHD, all this stuff. I have ADHD. I mean, everybody on this show that watched me, you know, I'm batshit. So think about it. Like, a lot of us are batshit that do this stuff in a kind of way, and I'm not saying in a negative way, that our brains are always constantly going. Our brains get in the way. We're constantly thinking. I mean, yesterday, here's a perfect example, and this is going to be a brand new theory I'm going to throw at you, Dark Hour, and I want you to kind of answer this a little bit. But last night I'm watching that documentary, Finding Jay. Finally, I watched it. Everybody kept talking about it. It was on Amazon Prime, you know, and he's out doing Bigfoot stuff. One thing he did bring up that I found interesting, because I've had this happen to me, is, you know, when we get rocks thrown at us, we hear about Bigfoot throwing rocks at us, right? But 9 times out of 10, we can't find the rock whatsoever. The rock's just not there. So as I was then in my group chat with all the ambassadors and all the teammates and kind of blabbing nonstop, William, who's on my team, who's a tracker, and he does like survivaling tracking and stuff like that, brought up something that I guess I never really thought about is what if, just what if, we already know, because I was saying, what if we're getting hit by a sound wave? We talk about Bigfoot and infrasound, right? And in the Bigfoot field, and kind of, you can probably back this up, that people use infrasound, and they're pretty much like Bigfoot does infrasound. Like most of the Bigfoot community believes that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we go by that now, how then, if we feel like we're getting hit by little rocks, right? What if we're actually getting hit by a sound wave? Because if Bigfoot can do infrasound, which that's a frequency in a sound wave, then what if a Bigfoot can do echolocation like Wilson? I didn't even think about that. So because think about it, at nighttime, when you're in the woods, we're getting hit. I've been hit with multiple rocks at nighttime, right? But when you stop to think about it, I don't see a Bigfoot, okay? Because that's not what I'm seeing now. There's trees, bushes, vegetation, everything's, you're in the woods. It's not like I'm standing in an open field. So throwing rocks at someone and being that accurate in the woods itself, behind trees and vegetation, I mean, let's think about it. That's very hard. Then you don't find the rocks at all. You think you got hit by a little rock, but you don't find the rocks. So what if it's echolocation? It's, it's nighttime. They're putting it out into the environment, which is a sound wave, because they hear you coming. We talk about this with tree knocks, right? And people think they carry sticks in the woods, and I think that's absolutely ridiculous. But if we think about that, maybe it's not rocks that it's always being thrown at us. Like, yes, we do know that people get rocks thrown at them, so that's not even a question. But what if sometimes when we think we're getting hit by a rock, but then we can't find them, what if that is a form of echolocation?
I love this. I absolutely love this, because I'll be honest with you, this hasn't occurred to me either. If this is a new theory, this is really cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't see why that wouldn't be a possibility. There are many animals who do possess that characteristic and are able to use it in many different ways. I mean, even, sonar like bats and so forth. I mean, these are on a more subtle scale, but if you were to amplify those, they would become physical, because you'd be moving air at a different frequency, or at least a different vibration. Yeah, that's fantastic, man. I'm kind of speechless because as I'm listening to you say this, I'm picturing it in my head. I'm like, yeah, this is absolutely a possibility. I mean, in the paranormal world, there are many times when people feel like they're touched. And of course, there's a more negative end of that where somebody feels like they've been hurt. Usually those particular experiences, like something shows up as it goes. So it might take a little time. It's not like a whack and then, you fall back. Although that's happened too. People have been pushed down the stairs. So we do know, at least as paranormal investigators, that the etheric does have some way to interact with us physically and can manifest itself in the physical world. So again, if Bigfoot has this, interdimensional aspect to it, his abilities may be limitless, and you might just be right, Gary. That's an awesome idea, man.
Well, and it's funny because I'm watching the documentary, and I'm like, some things just didn't make sense to me. But once again, I've been doing this forever, and but then I'm like, what if we feel like we're getting hit by something, like you're saying, and I was arguing it, I was debating it hard. I was debating it so hard. I'm like, listen, and they're like, no, Gary, it's rocks. I'm like, but we don't find the rocks. 9 times out of 10, we do not find the rocks. I go, and we know, like you just brought up, we know for a fact that sound can cause damage. Sound waves can cause dents into metal. We know all that. We also know that animals, dolphins and whales, I mean, I'm not 100%, but I think they can send out those waves and stun fish.
Yes, they can.
I think, okay. Yep. So then Will, who's on my team, and I just put him up, and he was like, Gary, he goes, well, bats give off echo, like you just said, bats give off echolocation, stuff like that. And I'm like, Will, oh my God, you might be onto something, because this is kind of what I'm trying to, this is what I'm trying to say, is that it may be a form of echolocation where we feel like we're getting little pebbles that are hitting us. All it is, it's a little sound wave that's hitting us. That's why, Dory, exactly. Gary argued never. But at the end of the day, like, it could be just that little bit that hits us, kind of like a ghost that touches us on the shoulder.
Exactly.
And we feel those manifestations. that we think, once again, it may, even as like a person that believes Bigfoot would be flesh and blood, that still doesn't make it paranormal, because we know animals in the wild kingdom that do this. So if, and when you think about it, you tell me, like, how would a Bigfoot or anything at nighttime, in the middle of the night, we could say like, oh, they have stellar vision and blah, blah, blah. But we all know that animals that have daytime vision and nighttime vision, Bigfoot wouldn't be able to have the best nighttime vision if it has regular daytime vision. Most animals can either see better at night or day. Okay, we understand that. So what we're saying is Bigfoot can just do it all, we'll say, right? So so at the end of the day, though, if we look at those little echolocation type hits where they're like, it's nighttime, you're walking through the woods with a group of people, you start getting close, but they don't know exactly where you are. So they put out a sound wave into the environment that they can focus in, and boom, that would make more sense that we're getting hit with that than a rock coming in and hitting us exactly at their target.
I've never, like, I've talked to lots of people that said they had rocks thrown at them, this and that, but I have yet to talk to somebody that's been hit with a rock where it left a mark, it hurt them, or anything like that. And now taking consideration, we're talking about something that's 8 feet tall, 600 pounds, throwing a rock, but yet nobody's knocked out, nobody gets hurt. So it's got to be something. I guess, when we start talking like this, it's got to be something other than a rock that's doing it. It's kind of like if you stand in front of like an amplifier in the front, and you hit the guitar, you get the sound that's hitting you. You can feel it, but you can hear it. You know what it is. But you could stand behind that same amplifier, hit the same thing. You're not going to feel as much, but you're not going to hear as much just because you're on the other side of it. So, when I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about, this theory, it's like, it's like they're not trying to hurt you, because obviously they're not again, I guess it just goes back to, I've never heard of anybody actually being knocked out by a rock. If that's what they're trying to do and they're trying to get you out of there, okay, why are they just going to throw a little pebble at you? Why hasn't anybody been knocked out by one? I don't know. Maybe they have. Just tons of people I've talked to have claimed to have rocks thrown at them. They've never been hurt, never left a mark, never did anything. So what is it? It's got to be something that's happening, because they're not lying. Something is hitting them. Yeah. They feel it, they know it, but yet they're assuming it's a rock. They don't hear anything bounce on the ground after. They don't hear anything like that. So there's gotta be some truth to this theory. Even if it's a 1%, there's got to be some truth in that, because again, something 600 pounds, 8 feet tall, it's going to throw a rock. You're not going to be like, oh, a pebble. You're gonna, even if it's a small rock, that sucker's going to hit you like a bullet. So there's got to be something else there that's being missed. And again, even if it's 1% of what it is, it's a good path to go on.
Now we have two things quick, and then John Adams corrected me, and he said, he goes, not true. Cats have perfect vision at both night and day. So when we get into the cat, and once again, for those of you who know, I worked as a licensed veterinary technician for a very long time. And so I understand how these night dwellers are, because I used to work with cats on a daily. But there is, yes, when I guess I said it kind of wrong in the fact of, yes, I mean, animals that can see night and day. Cats can see well at night. It's not perfect by any means, but yes, they still need ambient light, and they still need a light source for them to see better than, once again, other animals. Bobcats and things like that are a little bit different also. They have better night vision. It's been proven. They have better night vision than they do day vision. Now, once again, Will brought up a perfect thing. If we're going to make the Bigfoot have infrared vision like deer who can run at the dark. So maybe a Bigfoot has an infrared type vision. That would make a little bit more sense, but still doesn't make sense, once again, how, like Kenny just said, we're getting rocks thrown at us, right? Which feels like little pebbles. But he even said, if they wanted to really chuck a rock at your head and they're that accurate, like, because of course everybody says they're super accurate, right? That they would kill you. Like that, it's that simple. It's that simple.
There are definitely, and I'm struggling to remember which biological entity possesses this capability. I think definitely in the ocean, there are some fish or marine wildlife that I think they blow it up. No, it's, I'm thinking of the crab. Okay, there's a crab or some sort of hermit crab. He snaps his claws, which creates a sort of quick bubble, and it pops underwater, and it creates this pressurized sound wave that kills anything within a certain radius, and that's how he hunts. So, if Bigfoot has, again, something similar to that, where they're throwing sound, again, sound is just moving air. So if you're able to concentrate, the movement of that air to a pinpoint, you're able to send it across a great distance if you have enough energy behind it. So, that's definitely possible. It could be both too. I think the rock throwing is something like what Patrick Vaughn is mentioning. He says rock throwing is just passive aggressive behavior, in my opinion. I would agree with that. And I think that it probably goes along the realm of territory. I think they know that it's us, a human being, that they're then encountering, rather than prey or something else in the woods. And this is sort of a warning. Hey, you're in the wrong place. Now, personally, I've never stayed in a place where rocks have been thrown to find out what happens after. And most of the people that I've talked to haven't done that as well. So, I don't know if there's any, I've never heard of any legitimate stories of anyone being actually attacked by one of these creatures in a vicious manner. Nothing that has any corroboration or any real validity to it.
Yeah. With the rock throwing, I mean, I can tell you for myself, and I guess because we're talking about this, echolocation, if it was rocks that were hitting me, at one point in time, because I've had plenty of rocks thrown at me, but I did one time have rocks hitting at me, and it was nighttime. It was about 11 o'clock at night. And I stood there and just stood my ground. And when we stopped there and, nothing happened bad. But one thing I always think about, and it's funny, why don't, when this stuff happens, right? We're researchers. I'm super guilty of this 100%. So I'm talking about myself too, that when this stuff happens, right? Or we hear things yelling at us and roaring at us and tree knocks. Do you ever notice that none of us really go in the direction of where all that's coming from? So like rocks are being thrown at us, right? Like when I had rocks thrown at me, I stopped. Like I didn't leave, but I legit just stopped and right where I was going, right? Because I was trying to process it. And like I say, now I'm saying if that was even rocks, if that was echolocation, that may be a whole nother thing. But I didn't keep going forward. You ever notice none of us really keep going forward in the woods? Like, then you can twist that again. Is it because of the fear factor of what we're doing? Is it because of infrasound? We all know infrasound messes with our brains, messes with our bodies. Is this thing that we're getting hit with, this physical manifestation of a possible sound wave, is that also infrasound put in it?
I think so.
So when we get hit with it, maybe that's really what infrasound is in general. Rocks being thrown at us, I agree. It's passive aggressive behavior. Like Kenny said, if they wanted to kill us, there's no problem there. But the other thing is, if they really wanted to kill us, why would they have the need to throw a rock when they know they can snap us in half?
Right.
I mean, we hear stories where they rip deer in half. Yep. They rip dogs, and they hate dogs supposedly, and they rip dogs in half. So that's where I kind of sit with the rocks, is like we understand that we do get rocks thrown at us, but a lot of times when we can't find these rocks, is that even a rock? And we're just automatically, as humans, we have to think it's something.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The mind won't settle for less. If you felt something, it needs an explanation. It's like magic. You watch a professional magician and, he has a deck of cards. You pick a card, immediately that card disappears from the deck, and inside his pocket is a rose, and the card is inside of the petals. All right. Now that's fantastic. And you're going, wow, I'm in awe. That's amazing. But it's no secret. Your brain is going, what the hell just happened? Okay, so he put that in his pocket. Let me see those cards. Is that a real rose? You're thinking of all the different ways he could have gotten there. And I think that we can apply that in certain ways to Bigfoot, because magic is only magic until we understand how it works. Even if we're on the esoteric level and it's more intuitive, it's only magic until we understand how to work it and control it. So, again, maybe there's some aspect to Bigfoot communication and our relationship with this creature in there that stems from that sort of philosophy.
Yeah, it's crazy. And actually, John Adams, to answer your question, when that time I was talking about, when the rocks were thrown at me, I did hear something in front of me. So they weren't super stealthy because I knew that something was in front of me and I knew something was there. But I can honestly say at that point in time, I did hear something in front of me. I couldn't verify what it is. Once again, it's at nighttime,
Right.
even though we have headlamps and, night vision and all this other stuff, you don't always see it. So I didn't verify what it was in front of me other than rocks came in at me. But maybe it wasn't a rock. Maybe it was this sonic stuff. Because at the end of the day, what does that in the woods? Like, what does that in the woods? Nothing. I mean, that's where we all kind of stop and be like, well, what throws rocks at you in the woods? Well, and then there's just no animal that does that. So, but to answer your question, yeah, I did hear something in front of me.
I love analyzing sound, and out of everything that it comes from cryptids in their world, I love the sounds that are captured that may or may not be cryptids, because they're unearthly and otherworldly when we hear them, and perhaps makes the hair on our arms stand straight up, as frisson does. But that being said, we recognize, I think, vibrationally that there's something different there. Now, one person might take it and feel something negative off of it, where somebody else might feel it's more benign. So why that is definitely a question still to be answered. But when you throw a sample of a cryptid vocal under a frequency analyzer, you can see some of those supersonic and subsonic tones that exist within the whoops and so forth. And those, again, are on the peripherals, and they're not something that we hear. It's possible that Bigfoot even communicates more along those frequencies with each other, rather than, for us, it's just sounding like a whoop, 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 or whatever it's going to be. There's a lot more intention behind it. They might be actually conveying that feeling through those supersonic and subsonic frequencies.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it's mind blowing when you start getting deep into these conversations. And I'm glad that all three of us could have this. This is the right team of people to have this deep conversation about. So, absolutely. All right, well, we've come to the end of the show already. Like, it's already been over an hour.
It's over already. Jesus! Oh, my watch was broken. All right, this was fantastic. Went by way too fast, guys. Way too quickly.
It always does, especially when we start brainstorming these weird things. But all right, well. Dark Hour, hit us up. Like, tell us where they can find you and all your good stuff. And
absolutely. Well, you guys can find me at Dark Hour Paranormal. My email is darkhourparanormallive@gmail.com. If you have anything you want to talk about, any questions, we can go through that as well. You can also find me on Third Phase, as well as Third Phase of Moon occasionally. So go and check those guys out. And, of course, on Goof On with Rich Giordano.
Awesome. Kenny.
And Black Lotus. Sorry, Damien. Black Lotus.
Black Lotus, Sunday nights, right?
Sunday nights, 8 o'clock Eastern.
There we go. If you guys want to check out, I was on that show last week, but I was on at 9 o'clock. So check it out.
It was an awesome show, by the way.
Yeah. It was different. Like I say, gifting a corpse. I mean, if you want to talk about gifting a corpse, listen to that show, because that's the first time I've ever been asked that question. It was an amazing question. I was kind of like, huh. That one was hard to. Dory, I couldn't argue that because it was kind of mind numb. I didn't know how to respond to that at first. So he got me.
That was funny,
great.
Man.
Oh,
that was great.
That was great.
But Kenny, it was nice to meet you too as well, mate.
Yeah.
And Gary, always a pleasure. Every time we get together, we have a fantastic time, man. And we will do this again.
Oh, of course. And Kenny, any last words, my man?
I just want to say to Dory Wheeler, I read one of your posts earlier today about tomorrow marking a year and something pretty major in your life, and I just want to say congratulations. That's awesome. That you've conquered that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So if you're friends with Dory Wheeler, go on and check out her post, and you'll know what I was talking about.
No, it's amazing. And she's a big fan of ours, and we're a big fan of yours. So, keep on fighting the fight, as we like to say. But all right, well, Footer Nation, that's it. That was a mind-numbing show as always. What did you learn tonight? You learned echolocation now. So put that in your pocket. Put that in your pocket, because
put that in your repertoire.
That's it, and that's William on my team. He's the one that came up with that whole echolocation thing. So that's his theory. But
fantastic,
once again, it's brainstorming these ideas. As I always say, Footer Nation, you take good people, You don't argue, you debate subjects in a positive manner. This is how we come up with these weird different theories about echolocation and stuff. Like I said, I was debating hard in that group chat. I was going in, you know, but at the end of the day, listen, we debated, we all get along. We end up coming up with some great ideas and theories that are thinking way outside the box, especially with this whole Project X thing, that guess what? We may be onto something, but it's looking outside of the Bigfoot community now. Looking outside of what we already know is how, once again, we'll get the answers that we'll need. And the answers, and maybe a question to another question, but that's still okay, because as long as we keep asking questions, we all have a job to do.
You're right.
You're
right.
If we get the answers, there's no show. We got nothing to do, and there's nothing on TV on Thursday nights.
Once we get the answers, then we don't have to do this. I can do a lot more ice fishing and fishing. Don't have to worry about doing this anymore.
I don't know about you guys.
Fish.
I don't know about you guys, but when we get those answers and we realize that Bigfoot's real, I'll probably be putting together a television show just following this creature around to document its habitat and every question that we had on top of that. So, you know, I think it's funny that you mentioned that very quickly, because a lot of people say in the world of ufology, well, if disclosure happens, we don't have anything to do. Yes, you do. There are so many other questions that go into that. So, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, the MIB is going to be chasing me.
That's it. That's exactly what it's going to be doing. But as always, Footer Nation, thank you so much for watching. And as always, keep it squatchy. Stay safe out there. Deuces.